And given my somewhat lurgied state still, I wonder if I've assimilated something that I shouldn't have, as Janeway once said to the Borg Queen. Now, I was looking at this and I was thinking, I wonder if this is another First Contact tie-in, because it would make perfect sense that it would be, but actually it isn't. Because as you can see, the logo here is the old school Star Trek The Next Generation logo. So this is actually quite a standard issue Playmates ship. It's not one of the First Contact tie-ins or tie-ups. So I haven't ever opened this. I got it from Doncaster Toy Fair a little while ago. I distinctly remember it probably being one of the very early Playmates ones that I picked up because I thought it looked interesting. I didn't actually make it this past weekend, unfortunately, so I haven't had a chance to see that there was anything else there this time. But the box is cool. I like the box because it looks like a Borg cube. Now, you might recall I have in the past picked up an Eagle Moss Borg cube. That was boring as all heck, quite frankly. It slightly lit up, and each of the sides was exactly the same. So they took the path of least resistance in terms of design on that one. This one at least has actually got electronics that look like they do something. We've got 3 authentic Star Trek Borg ship sounds. And we've got realistic light up interior, and we've got a Borg display stand. So I have slightly higher hopes for this one than I had for the Eagle Moss version, it has to be said. Not that I had many hopes for it in the first place, it was a very random pickup. I love the fact they call it Borg ship, the most feared enemy ship in the galaxy, ages 4 and up. So the most feared ship in the galaxy is suitable for toddlers, basically. Nice. So the other thing that I noticed about this is that someone's done original artwork for these. So we've got something that looks a little bit like a Nebula class there, and something that looks a little bit like an Excelsior class there. I wouldn't call them the most accurate renditions, but I appreciate what they're trying to do. And they're both phasering the ship, and actually the scale is not unreasonable, because the Borg cube was huge. I think it was it 1 kilometre across? It was a big ship. So even when up against starships, you know, it would have dwarfed them, basically. So we've got 3 AA batteries, which I haven't looked at yet. Strangely, the test me buttons seem to actually be covered with sort of cling film. You know, so it's been shrink wrapped, I think, on the inside. But as I say, I haven't opened this, so I don't know what I'm going to find on the inside. But as you can see, it looks like they've gone for quite a lot of nice sort of detailing on the actual structure of it. So it looks like it's got a bit of an outer superstructure and then a sort of more solid core, which kind of is, I mean, it was a classic kit bash looking thing when it appeared on screen. You know, they must have destroyed countless model kits to get all the sort of greebling and stuff for it. Because it was designed in the days before CGI, of course. Now, subsequent Borg ships have, you know, adopted all sorts of different shapes. The other interesting thing about this, when I said earlier on that it wasn't part of the First Contact line, I wonder if in the original script at some point for First Contact, the primary Borg ship wasn't actually going to be a cube. Because of course in First Contact what we have is a Borg cube, like the one we see in Best of Both Worlds. And was it Q squared? Was that the episode when they first introduced the Borg? I may have got that wrong, that's purely from memory. But the Borg cube reappears in First Contact as if it's virtually identical to the original Borg cube that they'd encountered, and indeed the one from Best of Both Worlds. Obviously, it can't be that one because that one got blowed up. So, what then happens is that this cube disgorges a Borg sphere from inside it, and again from memory, that was the first time we'd seen a Borg sphere. Now Voyager, of course, gave us the Queen Diamond, and we had Borg probes, Borg tactical cubes. So Voyager really took the Borg into a whole different sort of level in terms of different types of Borg ship. But with First Contact, I think to that point all we'd had was the cube and then the sphere, and that was it. But Playmates released the sphere as part of the First Contact line, so I bet they were told that the sphere was going to be the Borg ship attacking Earth. And how I would have played it then is that the Borg sphere was getting clobbered, then it opens the temporal vortex, goes through, Enterprise follows it, and then Enterprise finishes it off with quantum torpedoes after it's made the time jump. So it wouldn't have affected the overall scope of the film, I don't think, but they probably wanted to start with the cube because that's what people were familiar with, if I were to guess. So let's have a little look at the blurb here. So we've got a sort of tech spec readout bit there, and I will do what I normally do, and I will read this out for you in my croaky throat. So, terminal on, Borg ship, limited known data unclassified. The Borg ship, one of the most notorious vessels of space, has encountered Federation craft several times. Combining both form and function, the Borg ship boasts a most unusual design. Classified as a cubiform vessel, the Borg ship's pragmatic use of space makes it perhaps the pinnacle of spacecraft engineering. Little is known of the ship's propulsion system, and Starfleet physicists and designers alike have been unable to replicate a workable scale model for further analysis. Without relative spatial relations, the Borg ship appears to travel at virtually any angle. Multiple scans of the vessel have provided little data. It is assumed that the ship is more versatile and maneuverable than a Federation starship. The Borg ship's top speed is unknown, however, it has been observed travelling at an over warp factor 9.9. Its massive hive-like structure, honeycombed together with a plethora of workstations, is the shell for multiple and redundant functions. Equipped with a highly adaptable defensive system, the Borg ship is capable of deflecting any Federation weapon. The Borg ship is also equipped with a highly effective laser cannon, is it? An extremely powerful tractor beam, yes, which has been studied in several battle situations. The Federation has determined that the Borg ship is a relentless and destructive enemy vessel. Further access denied, terminal off. As we know, it's also deeply good at regenerating itself. Doesn't particularly have traditional sort of bubble shields, it just takes hits directly and either ignores them or repairs itself very rapidly. So we've got a battery compartment, a display stand, sound activation buttons, interior light control switch. Okay, so there's two separate switches, I'll keep an eye out for that. Do not use rechargeable batteries. Turn on the control switch to light up the Borg ship's interior, press the Borg ship's activation buttons to engage the engine, tractor beam, laser cannon sounds. The Borg ship can be removed from the display stand for instant battle play. Excellent. That's about it. So, yeah. Now then, what I would really like to find here actually is, so very interestingly, copyright 1994. So this was pre-First Contact. How very interesting. But I know that the stand for this is very similar to the Sphere's stand. So it doesn't surprise me actually that this came first. So they had a Borg style stand ready to use with the Borg sphere because they'd already done it for this cube. So very interesting. So this was clearly a full year at least probably before the First Contact designs had finalised. I'm fascinated by their logic. I mean, they did do the Romulan Warbird and they did do the Vorcha class attack cruiser as well. They never did a full-size Cardassian, although I believe somebody once told me that they'd done a prototype for it, but it didn't get created in the end. So they did cover the enemy ships that there were, they did address quite often. They didn't do a Ferengi Marauder either in large scale. That would have been the other quite significant one to do, I think. And obviously, but the Borg are such a big bad, it makes perfect sense that they tackle this one as one of the ones that they did do. So, let's get into it, shall we? Well, I was going to do a super smooth cutaway to the Borg cube. It turns out, though, that on opening the box here, some assembly is required, because this is not what I was anticipating. It's actually got the cardboard inners containing the sides of the cube. Now I wonder if I now get to apologise to Eagle Moss, because are each of these identical? Well, they're looking pretty identical to me. So I think each of these sheets are actually going to be exactly the same. So as much as I was bad-mouthing Eagle Moss for adopting identical sides to the Borg's cube, I think that, I mean, you could put, mind you could put these on in different configurations, I suppose. So you could rotate them and so on to make them look different if the attachments allow for that. And what I've also got here then is, so I've got all six sides there. So woe betide you if you find an incomplete one of these. Your Borg's your cube's is going to end up looking rather silly. I've also got all these little tiny attachment pieces here. So presumably you've got to use those to fix these panels onto the side of the Borg cube. So I've also got a piece of the rather nice stand there with a nice Borg nation symbol on it. If nation is the right word for the Borg, I don't know. Hive mind symbol, I don't know. So you better leave me with this for a minute, I think, because I could be a little while.
A few moments later.
So here we are. Now, I've purposefully zoomed in quite a bit here, because I wanted to give you an idea of the sort of the feel of it when it's lit as I have it lit, obviously, and it's clever. That to me looks very much like it did in the series when they first introduced us to the Borg cube. They've taken this sort of layered approach to it, and I'm laughing now because you know how I called out to you that it was a deadly ship to be in the hands of a 4-year-old when I started, but the irony is there's no way a 4-year-old could actually put this together. No way, because you've got to clip, as I thought, each of these panels onto little pegs that you've put into all the different sides of the Borg cube in order to build it up. But that's clever on a number of fronts, because it gives it more of a sort of three-dimensional depth feel, but B, it makes it bigger than it is coming out of the box, so it does make it that much more impressive. So it gives it more volume. So I think we're at about it's 7 inches by 7 inches by 7 inches. I do have some niggles. You can't switch it on in such a way that the lights are then permanently on. So you can't illuminate the cube as a standalone effect. It only lights up when you use the sound effects. So that, I think, is a missed opportunity from Playmates. Also, the box says quite clearly that you can detach the cube from its display stand for sort of quick action play. I don't think you can. Reason being, in the standard Playmates approach to life, which they've adopted here, the battery cover, well, there were 2 battery covers basically. So there's this one, which is the one that would fit normally onto the bottom of the cube when it was separate, and there's another battery cover that fits into the cube when it's on its stand. So in order to remove the cube from its stand, you'd have to expose the battery compartment. You could kind of do it, but you'd have to slide it in a fairly complicated fashion off the stand itself. You can't just pluck it off as the box would suggest that you can. There isn't any magnetic lock-on with this. That's not how it's set up. So that, I think, is a bit disingenuous of them. Also, I don't know where the red's gone. On the box, there were very clearly red inserts in these gaps in the stands, and the only bit of red it's got is the emblem. Now, maybe I'm missing stickers, but I'm hesitant in saying that I am, because I do have the full instruction sheet here, and it doesn't have any instructions for putting stickers on anything, which is, again, is the normal Playmates approach to life. So if there were stickers, I would have thought that that would have been on the instruction sheet, so I don't think there were. So that's my certificate of authenticity. There we are, copyright 1994, and that apparently is what was paid for it back in 1995. 20th of April 1995, £29.99. John Britton, Toymaster, Doncaster. There you go. So a little bit of history there. And that does mean this wasn't, although it was in the box, it definitely had been out of the box, because there weren't any demonstration batteries in the battery compartment. I put fresh batteries in. So having said that, let me kill these lights off, and for what it's worth, I will show you what the light up effect does achieve and what the sounds are. Now, just a word of warning, the sounds are quite loud, I think, as compared to standard Playmates sounds. So you might, I'm going to stand a little bit back from it when I do it, or as far back as I can. The switches are incredibly subtle, because it's all a uniform colour, although they've done something with the paint of it. The paint seems to have a slightly silvery hue to it in places. I think it shifts with the light. So it's a nice effect, because it means it's not just a dull black, which I think is a clever move on their part. So I've definitely here we go, I've got the orientation right now. So the orientation is actually sort of this way round. So there is a switch in here which turns the light effect on and off, and I've switched it on, so it's just here. It's actually quite difficult to reach. And there are 3 little buttons on the top for the sound effects. So here we go with the sound effects. With a little bit of luck, you might see the lights. Now, I thought they'd have gone for green lights, but I don't think they did. Let me zoom all the way in. So I think you can see those lights coming on. Now, maybe they were more powerful when it was newer, but I don't get the impression this has been played with a great deal, if at all. So the lights are definitely on in there, and I imagine that obviously if they redid it now, this being a sort of relatively old model but coming from '94, you would probably find that they had much brighter LEDs, and they might well do green ones. So it would be a different approach to life. So it's not totally exciting sound effects. They do sound similar to the ones from the show, certainly, but there's no voice samples there, because at the end of the day, this is Playmates, not Diamond Select. Now, Diamond Select never did Borg. They never went down that route. They stuck to their more traditional ships. So it's interesting in the sense that this is by far and away, I think, the biggest example of a Borg cube as a toy that I've ever seen, because there aren't that many examples of Borg cubes as toys at the end of the day. The Eagle Moss one isn't a toy, not really. It's not as interesting as this is. Now, I will say in the Eagle Moss one's defense, this one takes a very similar approach to the Eagle Moss. All these sort of 4 panels around this here are identical. So they haven't differentiated the design, but then the Borg didn't differentiate their designs. The top and the bottom are slightly different. They're quite clever, because they've allowed the stand to go into the bottom through a gap in this paneling. So they've designed it with that in mind. So that's clever, and you can get access to the buttons through the paneling at the top. I don't know whether I've even optimized that, but you can definitely get to them through the paneling. So that's very clever. And they've obviously kept their costs quite low by doing that, because 5 out of the 6 are identical. So I do like it. I think it's quite striking. I think if you lit it correctly, even if you even sort of gave it a bit of a sort of a green light tinge to it, I think it would look quite impressive. And I dare say, if you were brave, you could open it up and obviously rewire the lighting, because it's got holes in it already. all you'd need to do is put in some LED strips these days, and you could give it a really nice green hue from the inside, and you'd be laughing, actually. I mean, I have to say, looking at it, it's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger than I thought it would be because of the clever way they've done it. Now, Playmates do this to me every now and again. They surprise me. And I wouldn't have thought that you would have to actually assemble something coming out of the box other than possibly sticking the odd nacelle into an Enterprise. This is something else again. This is a really clever idea, and I really like to see toys that are doing clever ideas because it's straightforward to do. Even a numpty like me can put that together without too much difficulty, And I appreciate that. I do appreciate that because, I'm not the best when it comes to construction efforts on these things. So I really do appreciate the cleverness behind this. It's just such a shame that it wasn't done in an era when they could have done lighting and sound a little bit better. We could have had Locutus speaking at us, so close, so very, very close. And then of course Diamond Select didn't bother. And I can understand why you wouldn't. Because think about this from a normal packaging point of view. Trying to package this in a conventional fashion would have been bulky. So if you try and do a bigger version, say, just for the sake of it, and you try and give it lots and lots of detailing and so on, you've got a huge, cubic box, basically, to put on the shelves. It's probably not going to sell. Well, it's not that it won't sell, but it's going to chew up a lot of space that could be selling other things for the shop. So they might not be keen to stock it. That's just my thinking. It'd be interesting to hear comments on that, as to what you think about this, whether or not it would actually have sold, whether there'd be a demand for it, I don't know. But I loved it when it turned up because I thought, yes, somebody understands. Spaceships do not need to be aerodynamic. They can look like whatever you want them to look like unless they need to re-enter an atmosphere. And the Borg don't give two hoots about that. They'll just beam down to the surface of a planet if they need to do something with the planet. So it works fine. And so it's just such an iconic ship design because it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not differentiated. No one's got a clue where the engines are, which is a bonus if you're fighting something because they don't know where to shoot you. It's just a great idea. And the Best of Both Worlds episodes do go down as those sort of really two iconic episodes of Next Generation, when Next Generation really came of age in many respects, I think. And we saw brilliant sort of battle tactics being used by the Enterprise to actually rescue Picard, and all of that good stuff. So I think it's really, really impressive. I've no idea where I'm going to put it, but it is definitely staying with me, I think, this one, because I like the way it's been approached, and I just think, yeah, definitely a good one, that one, I think. So aside from those, the slight sort of niggles, and some very disappointed 34-year-olds who weren't able to cope with it 30 years ago because they couldn't actually construct it, I'm sure it's fine. So on that bombshell, I will leave this one here. And next time we will have a look at what Playmates might have thought was going to be the prime Borg ship in First Contact, because I suspect that is what's gone on here, is that this was supposed to be along the lines of the Vorcha and the Romulan Bird of Prey, and the Klingon Bird of Prey is standard adversary ships, and this is one of those from that line, in effect, because it's got all the hallmarks of that. But then, of course, come First Contact, the Cube ends up being the primary aggressor, but Playmates didn't know that at the time. So, live and learn, of course, except that they didn't so much because then they ran out of time. But nevertheless, this I like. I think in particular, I like the way they've done this subtle paint application, and the fact they've made this three-dimensional layering to it. It just makes it that much more interesting, and to my mind, that much better of a toy. Would it survive as a toy? Well, that's another question. I'm not sure that it would. I think this one is definitely one for display only, because these little bits are very flexible, and they might just snap off cleanly, but they only gave you as many struts as you needed in the box. So 24 struts, that was your lot. So if any of those snap, you're going to be in trouble. You could probably get 3D printed ones these days, I have no idea, but if you did break it, you would be in trouble, I think. So Nothing more to say on this one, really, I think. I was going to say these ones actually seem to be fairly unusual. I've seen people trying to get quite high prices for these. I don't particularly know why. Maybe they didn't sell very well, so, you know, who knows. But I'll leave you there for now. Cheers.